Hello and welcome back to Team Numo. In today's video, I'll be going over adaptation, allusion, ekphrasis, and intertextuality. So we're going to start out with intertextuality. Intertextuality is the way that one text influences another. So here, to be clear, by text, I don't just mean the written word. It doesn't have to be a poem, a story, a novel. It could also be graphic novels, it can be movies, it can be television shows, it could be paintings, it could be sculptures, it could be music. All of these things can be considered a text. And everything that's created is influenced by what came before it. We don't live our lives in a vacuum. So every time we read a book or watch a movie or listen to a song, it has the potential to influence the things that we create. So we're going over 3 specific ways that we can spot intertextuality, and those are allusion, adaptation, and ekphrasis. However, there are many more ways that text can relate to one another. These intertextual connections can be direct in the form of parodies or satires, but it can also be less direct in that major texts influence others. So you might see that after one novel comes out, there's sort of a shift in writing styles, or maybe something has the potential to shift genre conventions, or maybe one director has a specific sort of visual style and suddenly movies try to copy that style or, inadvertently become more similar to that style. But a single text can have many intertextual connections to many texts. For example, the movie Frozen is a loose adaptation of The Snow Queen, which is a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. But it is also influenced by all of the Disney princess movies that came before it, and it follows the musical and plotting conventions of an animated Disney musical, which trace back to the success of The Little Mermaid. Now you might be thinking, but hey, there were Disney princess musicals before The Little Mermaid. And you're right, but there was a definitive shift with The Little Mermaid in the way that they created the plotting and musical structures of the movies. Additionally, this movie includes Easter eggs for movies like Tangled and Wreck-It Ralph and characters like Mickey Mouse. So next we have allusion. Allusion is a literary device in which the writer or speaker refers either directly or indirectly to a person, event, or thing in history or to a work of art or literature. For example, "He's a regular Romeo with the ladies" refers to Romeo and Juliet. If someone has a passing knowledge of Romeo and Juliet, they're pretty sure to understand this reference and get what the writer is saying about the character. But what do we do with allusion in analysis? So first we should look up what is being alluded to unless we are very familiar with it. Basically, I wouldn't need to look up a reference to a famous person I know about, so I wouldn't really need to look up a reference to George Washington, right? But I might need to look up a reference to a specific movie or book that I've heard of but never watched or read. After I understand what the allusion is, then I can start to think about how that allusion can relate to themes and messages from the text I am analyzing. So basically, if I'm reading a book with a reference to Icarus, I would look at how the myth relates to the text that I'm analyzing. If the book that I'm reading is about someone who never follows good advice, then it becomes pretty clear why they would choose a reference to Icarus. But if it's about someone who suffers from a serious problem with jealousy, then looking up the myth, if I don't understand it, and learning about Daedalus would probably help me clarify the purpose of that allusion more. Of course, if you don't know that myth, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but you could always go look it up. So next we have adaptation. Literary adaptation is the adaptation of one text into another genre or medium. Often we see this as a movie based on a book, but we also see books based on shows and plays based on movies and so on. But why are there so many adaptations? There are a few reasons for the popularity of adaptations. First, they're often less financially risky than original content. Especially in the movie industry, they know that it is much easier to get people to go to that live action Disney remake of a beloved animated film than it is to get someone to go to a live action movie based on completely original content. Second, people really enjoy things that are both comfortably familiar and novel at the same time. So we crave new things, but we also crave nostalgia, and adaptations are sort of that sweet spot where we know what's going to happen, but we also feel like maybe we don't know. Or at least it feels like a new experience. And that brings me to the third reason. It's as close as you'll get to re-experiencing your first time encountering a story. So for example, the first time I read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, I could never get that moment back, right? It is gone, it is in the past. But then I got to watch the first Harry Potter movie, and it was a brand new first experience. But then when they played the movie with a live symphony doing the soundtrack, it felt like the first time watching that movie again. So it was like I was encountering it for the first time, even though I had seen that movie plenty of times and read the book once. So it's really just about creating those feelings. We crave that feeling of nostalgia and novelty at the same time. But how do we analyze adaptations? So first, it's important to distinguish between comparing and contrasting and analysis. A compare-contrast simply tells you how close the adaptation is to the original. This itself is not a marker of a good or bad adaptation. Sometimes changes have to be made because of the change in genre. Something might not work in a movie that works in a novel. Something might not work in a video game that works in a movie. For example, the Lord of the Rings movie trilogy is not completely faithful to Tolkien's writing. However, they're widely considered to be great adaptations and amazing movies. So to analyze an adaptation, you must first locate the differences between the original and the adaptation, then examine how those changes affect the story, characters, themes, and so on. So it's not enough to compare contrast, but that is your starting point. So then you are going to use those differences to examine themes, to examine ideas, to examine character treatment. And you can combine those with sort of different ideas from theories and things like that. So consider what those changes do. Do they have a positive or negative impact on the story? Does it impact the audience? Were the changes made to change the age level maybe? Or does it create additional meaning for a modern time? For example, if I want to take Emma and adapt it into a movie in the 90s, I would get Clueless. Clueless is completely updated. It keeps those same themes, it keeps many of the ideas, but it sets them in a modern time for a modern audience and makes those ideas accessible and relevant. At the same time, everyone who had read Emma before seeing that movie was instantly aware of what was going on and had that level of nostalgia and familiarity that sort of makes it even better, especially knowing that there would definitely be differences. So next we have ekphrasis. So this is the use of detailed description of a work or visual art as a literary device. This is often found in ekphrastic poetry, in which a poem is describing visual art. But what do we do with ekphrasis? So the first thing you should do is look up the visual art that is being described. You can read their description all day, but it is not the same as looking at the art. Next, examine that piece of art for yourself. Look at as much detail as you possibly can. Then note what the writer of the book or story or poem or what have you that you're analyzing focuses on or ignores. They will pretty much never be able to write every little detail about the piece of art that they're describing. So what was important to them? So based on what they focus on or ignore, think about what their purpose is in the description of the visual art. If it's part of a longer work, how does this description inform your understanding of the text's themes and ideas, or character treatment, or any other thing that you might be trying to analyze? Now, if it's perhaps a poem and it's only a description of this one piece of visual art, what might the way they describe those details be conveying the writer's message? How does it work to convey the themes of a piece? So the themes of the description, or for example, an ekphrastic poem, may not be exactly the same as the themes or messages that the painter of a painting it was based on was trying to convey. They might be the same, but they might be different. So you would want to look at the description of the painting and see how it might focus on something different than the painting's artist may have focused on. And then you can start to piece together what the writer may be trying to say. So that's it for today. I hope this is helpful, and happy learning.